calling the meeting to order. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce,
Here.
Mr. Gentili, Miss Goodman, Miss Kaminsky.
Here.
Okay, all set.
Okay, thank you. Everyone has had a chance to look at the agenda. I see nothing to be changed on it. Does anybody else have any comments, changes, things to be pointed out? If not, could I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
okay.
Who seconded
Julie,
that?
Bill.
Bill,
Okay,
Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
yes. Mr. Dunce,
Yes.
Miss Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. We have no public, so we have no public comment. Next item, approval of last month's meeting's minutes. I presume everybody's got a copy of that and has seen it, had a chance to read it through. And I think there's a couple items in there. You know, we have to make some adjustments. I'll mention what I saw. We've kind of touched base with Julie already on it, but I'm gonna review it with everybody. And if anybody else sees something else, we will make the adjustments accordingly. First item is Andrew is showing absent from the meeting last month. He was here. Otherwise, we couldn't have 7 people voting on the various items. Speaking of voting, on the second page, we got 2 items where the vote was actually 7. It's showing 6 yays. So I need a correction on that. Also, at the top of the page, on the first page, we have Karen being gone at 1:50 p.m. That is incorrect because I think we adjourned the meeting because the little fanfare last month around 12:56. So we need a little adjustment on that. And then going on to page 3 of 4, the center portion of the page where it says Mr. Lynn and Mr. Ha met with Joyce Saylor regarding the Manistee Township zoning. That part is okay, but the next part we need to make a little adjustment. Julie, can you read back as to what we've already mentioned to you for adjustments? So the other
Yes,
members will observe it?
Yep. On the 5th paragraph down on page 3, it's going to read, Mr. Lind and Mr. Haw met with George Saylor at George Saylor's office regarding the Manistee Township zoning. Mr. Lind presented the information he had on the subject at Manistee Township zoning meeting, and he answered all of the questions he could. Richard Wilson was also present at the Manistee Township zoning meeting. He is the attorney for Manistee Township.
Good. Does anyone else see any other needed changes in last month's minutes? Changes, adjustments? If not, could I have a motion to approve the minutes for last month per the changes we talked about?
So moved as amended.
Okay.
Second.
Please.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cindy.
Yep.
Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just adjusting my papers here a few minutes. Okay, ready to go. Moving forward to the Treasury report. May 2020 accounts payable. I assume everybody's gotten a copy of that, has had a chance to look at it and review it. And any comments, adjustments, questions? Go for it. Okay, if there's no comments, adjustments, could I have a motion, please, to approve as proposed or presented for the May 2021 accounts payable report?
So moved.
Okay, second, please.
Second.
Okay. Julie, roll call, please.
Was that Phil again that seconded it?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce,
Yes.
and Mr. Suda.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the May 2021 financial statement, or the revenue and expenses statement. The trial balance report statement and the other attachments showing rent and fuel gallons pumped, etc. I assumed everybody has a copy of that, has had a chance to look at it. And any comments? The only comment I have is that we do have miscellaneous expenses, state reimbursement. We don't have any of those coming in yet. So that looks like that's what's pushing us into the abnormal or negative side of things. Am I
That
correct, Gary?
would be correct, yes.
Okay.
Yep, so I'm gonna work with Barry this week and get him the stuff that he needs so he can submit that for reimbursement for
Okay.
the state. Mhm.
Okay. If there's no other comments, et cetera, could I have a motion to approve the May 2021 revenue and expenses report and the trial balance and the other items attached to the report as presented?
So moved.
Okay. Second, please.
I'll
Support.
second.
Cindy
Okay.
can have.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Julie, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Dunce,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
While we're on financials, one thing I will add, just to mention to the board, is the auditor has completed the audit. That has been
Okay.
submitted to the state, and tentatively, he is scheduled to join us next month for our meeting to give a presentation to the board on the audit.
Thank you, Barry. That was something that Barry and I had talked about earlier, about a week ago, and the question to me was, should we do it over the as a video or in person? I felt we should go in person next month. Hopefully, we can all join here as much as possible, and some on the video. But I thought, for having him here to talk and tell us about it would be better for all of us.
And I'll add to that is, I'm kind of doing a trial run this month of kind of a in-person with Zoom participant. So as you all can see, the three of us are here in the conference room. Next month, I'm expecting that we'll have more in attendance here. But if anyone wants to still participate from Zoom, they can, and it will look very much like you're experiencing today.
Does everyone feel comfortable with that thought process? Or what's gonna
Yep.
transpire? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I can tell you, I would have been there today, but I'm waiting for I might have to make a lift with my tractor for some product for my wife's business. So that's why I'm not in person today, so.
Jeff, hire it done. Hire it out. Okay, that's fine. Okay, moving on. Executive committee did not meet last month. Budget committee did not meet last month, but I was gonna say it's probably getting time to kind of meet to put together a proposed budget for 2021, 22.
It's actually a little bit past time.
Oh, it is past time. Okay.
So I've actually, Susan and I talked about this a little bit last week. I've gone through and kind of given a rough estimate on filling in most of the items. But it would be good if the budget committee met soon, and kind of reviewed that and then, you know, moved things around as they saw fit.
Okay, well, this month, in the next week or so, I will contact the budget committee members and get a date set up that's convenient for you, Barry, and myself, and the other members of the committee,
Okay?
and we'll go from there. Capital Projects Committee, nothing new on that. The only thing is, a while back, we were talking about getting a quote for doing some concrete work out on the T-hanger door slide way. Never got the estimate from the person I talked to. Called him a couple weeks ago, said they were gonna get it, but he says we're awful busy, and that's the story I'm hearing. So I have contacted another one for another quote, but that person is busy too and won't give me one until maybe September. They're all booked pretty good.
I will add, though, I believe that committee should also meet soon, because any requests they have should be in the budget.
Correct.
So those kind of go hand in hand. So if the committee isn't meeting, there's not gonna be really anything they're gonna be able to do in the next year because there won't be budgeted funds.
So let me piece some things together and try to do a capital projects committee meeting prior to the other one, so we can see if we can slide that together. It won't take much time to do that.
And then one thing I will add is I've had a request come to me from county commissioners about looking if there's a project we might think would qualify under the extra capital funding that the county has received as a result of the various programs out there, that we could possibly put together a proposal and make a request to the county on that.
Okay,
And I think it would also be appropriate for that committee to
correct.
have that conversation. Jeff, can you give us any further guidance on that? What is the county thinking?
No, we have not had any meeting in regard to this as of yet. We did receive the first half of the installment. The second half will come in 18 months from the first. There are guidelines that we have, but again, they tend to be guidelines. Once the expenditure is made, then they will tell you if it was something you could use it on or not, which seems a little backwards, and I won't use any profanity in the process of that, but at any rate, as I mentioned to Barry, you know, with the hangar doors, that could be a possibility of getting them done and us getting those hangars back in service and generating revenue for the airport, which is obviously good. To be continued.
Jeff, do you have any feel as to how much money we're talking about, or it's whatever you submit a project for?
Well, the entire amount that we have is about just shy of 4.8 million.
Oh, okay.
And we received half of that. And we do have some ideas on where some of it's probably going to be going. But again, at the moment, it's nothing more than conceptual. And we hope to get some things shored up. Obviously, there's a lot of people want to have a lot of things done, and there's certain things that should fall in line with county government, and certain things that could be bonuses as opposed to primary issues, is like I like to refer to as worry about the meat and potatoes before you go for desserts.
Correct.
We're,
Unless, like in my case, I like to have the dessert first to make sure you have room for it.
I think if we're gonna work on those hangers, it'd be nice to get them painted too, if we can swing some money for that.
That can all be on a proposal.
All be as a package, because I still have some old quotes for painting, so it should give us some idea as to what kind of monies we're talking about.
Could be a good task for the airport authority to have a painting bee.
Yes, but who's gonna bring the lemonade? You?
You bring the lemonade, I'll bring the ladder.
Okay, sounds good.
There's still birds flying in and out of that one hangar with a new door on it too.
You mean the one Cape Air uses?
The one that needs the floor work done on it.
Oh,
Seal
okay,
it.
okay,
Yeah, that one there. There's still birds flying in and out of there.
okay.
Okay. I was not aware of that. but thank you.
Yeah, they haven't quit.
Okay, I'm gonna leave those two items there where it's in my ballpark to contact the members of the two committees and get something set up and get Barry, tuned into it and aligned with us. So that's where we'll set and leave that subject for a while. Okay, Barry, it's your shot, Airport Director's Report.
Okay. Okay, so no accidents or incidents to report. I just added this next item that overall, we're very busy right now. Typically, June is not a really busy month. Usually, the kind of summer busyness happens in July and August, and then often carries on into the fall. Often in June, we're scratching our heads and saying, when's summer gonna start? When are people gonna start coming? We didn't have to scratch our heads this year for June. It's as busy as we would expect in July. Last week, Thursday in particular, I mean, we had 2 very large jets out here, 3 other ones on the ramp, plus all the airline flights. It was kind of a crazy Thursday.
Oh, like a real airport.
Kind of like a real airport, yep.
There you go, good.
Local revenue sharing grants, I can report that our grant request was approved by the Revenue Sharing Board at their Monday meeting last week. And there is a new business item later on to approve a quote for doing that project now that we have funding secured. I met over the last month with Sheriff Gutowski as well as some people within TSA on the LEO coverage. As I suspected that the sheriff is right now reluctant to commit resources with Cape Air's schedule. You know, if you think about prior air service here, we had 1 or 2 flights a day, meaning, you know, we needed coverage from the sheriff's department once or twice a day. With Cape Air now, that's 4 or 5 times a day, which is, you know, at least double the amount of time commitment that was previously required, which, given their staffing levels, although they do have new deputies coming online right now, so it's going to get better on their side, but still they're questioning some of the fundamentals of how much support do they need to provide. That then ties into this grant that we used to get that paid for them. That grant expired and it never got reapplied for. The terms of that grant do still provide kind of a significant level of commitment, and again, that's coming into question. So I've gone back to TSA and said, you know, what is the requirement? And essentially the requirement is if you get the grant, then you have to follow through on all those commitments. And the grant isn't going to cover 100% of the costs, but it will offset a significant portion. If you don't have the grant, then given our airport classification, it's basically just a best effort requirement. So, but that would require changes or approved changes to our security plan by the TSA to allow us to kind of pull back the level of commitment that we're currently saying we're going to provide through the Sheriff's Department. So that's kind of where that stands. I have not, after I've gotten the information from TSA, gone back to Sheriff Kotowski and kind of filled him in. Ultimately, I feel it's his call, it's his resources, what he is comfortable committing to. But I think I have now the full set of information for he and I to make that decision. So stay tuned on where this goes, but that's the latest information that I have.
So if the sheriff says, no, I'm not able to do anything out here to the airport, then you're gonna have to modify the program or the
Yep.
written report or the procedures
And they
with
wouldn't
TSA.
then be eligible for any of that funding.
Okay.
So, I mentioned this last month. We've been notified that we're due for our state fuel tank inspection. I've received a second email on that, and it doesn't give a specific date, but you know, they say within 30 days, but I think 30 days have come and gone, so sometime soon. But to make that inspection actually much better, we did get the fuel system monitor that the board approved the bid for that, I believe, 2 months ago.
Right.
That got installed last Thursday, and as far as I know, it is running fine. I haven't had a chance. It was running well on Friday. I haven't had a chance this morning to see if there are any issues with it. But that will now at least get us back in compliance. So when we do have our inspection, it will not be quite as bad as it could have been.
So the state fuel tank inspection, it's in their ball court.
Yep.
In their ballpark. And so, let it set until they come.
Yep.
Right.
Manistee Township zoning update. So as reported last month, Jerry and I had met with George Saylor at the end of April, just before the May Manistee Township Planning Commission meeting. And I pinged George a little over a week ago, and then I also saw him middle of last week. He got back to me finally late in the day on Friday with a list of questions, which to me says that he hadn't really done anything in the last 6 weeks and finally started looking at things on Friday. But then I got a subsequent email from him this morning, and the township has finished their internal updates to the draft document. They have submitted it to their lawyer, which is Richard Wilson, for review. Their intention is to have a final version at their July 7th meeting. So I believe this is now on George's radar. Richard Wilson has also been brought into the conversation by George on, you know, some of our concerns or questions. So I believe over the next 2 weeks between now and the 7th, there will be movement on this, and we'll see where it is going to take us. When I talked to the township zoning administrator last week, I think it was Wednesday, you know, they were, you know, still of the opinion that there was very minimal impacts on them. I tend to disagree from what I've read. We'll see how this all comes together. But it should be between now and our next meeting, so stay tuned.
I'm gonna say, Barry, that if you go down to talk to George again and you want some company, give me a holler,
Okay,
and I'll go down there with you.
will do. So as far as enplanements go and airline performance last month, we had a total enplanements in May of 782, which is our third best May, shy of the, I think, 820 that we needed to be our second best May, but in line with what I was expecting. Performance-wise, the 2% canceled, so there were, that roughly equates to 2 flights for the month. 11% were more than 15 minutes delayed, which is down, and actually looking at the numbers, the best Cape Air has done since they've started service. So overall, all of those aspects are going pretty well. Moving on to airfares.
That
Yep.
that 11%, is that still basically the morning flight?
It's more sprinkled out throughout
Okay,
the day,
good. Well,
especially now that they're operating 4 flights a day. It can happen
Okay, well,
anytime.
that's better than just
So yeah,
all
it's
focused
not
on-
all
right.
focused on that morning flight.
That's good.
I'm gonna see if I can, this window, rotate. Okay, so airfares, we're getting into the summer season, and quite frankly, our flights are getting fairly full, which means our fares are getting driven up, and American and United out of Chicago are not, they don't have the dirt cheap fares that they used to. But Traverse City and Grand Rapids and Muskegon are still fairly low fare, surprisingly. So, we are, compared to what we've been at, now at a significant disadvantage on, connecting fares out of here. On average, almost $100 more than the other 3 airports, with the other 3 airports being about equal to each other. So you'll see nothing under Manistee other than our Chicago flight is highlighted. So that means we weren't the cheapest on any route other than the route to Chicago. But, for example, talking about our capacity, so this week, starting Wednesday, there are 13 flights in a row that are sold out. And next week, which is just before the 4th, there's like 16 flights in a row, so basically 4 days worth of flights that are all sold out in the direction people coming into town. Still good number of seats
Good.
the opposite, but that would mean people would need to leave northern Michigan when it's the best time to be here. So that doesn't happen as much as it could otherwise. And then there's similar but not quite as dramatic counterflows after the 4th, where everyone's then leaving, that came up. It's interesting with the 4th being on a weekend, how still the weekend before is still very busy for the airline. When the 4th is in the middle of the week, that's very common that the weekend before and the weekend after, it's like, which one are you going to take off? With the 4th being on a weekend, I was not expecting the week before to be as booked as it is, but then going throughout July, many days, a lot of sold out flights. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in my report, but things are filling up.
I think a lot of the expected patterns we've seen in the past are shifting a little bit this summer due to.
There are
our-
some
our
notable
year and a half.
differences.
You're right.
So, and
That's-
part of it may be because Cape Air has connections, which we've not really had before. So one of the differences I've noticed is that historically Saturdays were kind of a dead travel day, not a lot of people flying. Now Saturdays are one of our busiest days, but I think that is because of the leisure traveler who's connecting through, you know, a lot of people will book a Saturday to Saturday type vacation coming in. Whereas if you're just coming up from Chicago, I think that's less likely the case, that you're more of a weekend type traveler. The other thing I've noticed difference is that historically Monday morning was one of our busiest flights. Basically people kind of trying to get that extra half day out of their weekend before they went back to work. Monday mornings now are nothing special. If anything, they're light. And I think that's just because still a lot of people are not going back into the office yet and are still can work remotely, so therefore they don't have to be back into the office by noon on a Monday. So that changes that dynamic.
However it goes, the longer they stay here, the more money they spend in the area.
Yep.
Hey, Barry, just getting back to last month's question on those pricing.
Yes.
With the other flights possibly being basic economy.
Mm-hmm.
I probably should have explained, because maybe some of you don't know about the basic economy flights, if those were included in your pricing.
Right.
We at the office will not sell those basic economy unless people specifically request it, because it is totally different than doing the regular economy class, where the basic economy, there is no changes or refunds whatsoever on those flights. So if you can't travel for some reason, you can't even pay to change them. You would just lose your tickets. There is no seat assignments. You cannot get pre-assigned seats. It's only assigned after check-in. So if you have a group of you going, you may not sit together whatsoever, or even a couple. You're not eligible for any upgrades. You cannot pay for upgrades. Your ticket has no value whatsoever. So there's a lot of variables with that.
And
Basic
Cindy,
economy
isn't it true that on some carriers, even carry-on baggage is not included?
Correct. You are not allowed to take a carry-on bag on some of them. Some have changed. I think American Airlines, you can now, possibly Delta, but I think on United, you cannot take a carry-on bag. And if you show up there with a carry-on bag, they will make you pay to have it checked.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
so
that's how they get lower fares, is by taking out all those things and making you pay extra for them.
right. The only thing is since you don't get a seat assignment till after you check in, if the flight is full, you will be the first one bumped. So sometimes we had some clients that requested that because they knew they were traveling, they were going to cancel, they wanted the cheapest flight, but once they got to the airport, one, they couldn't sit together, and two, all there was the Comfort Plus seats, and they made them pay for an upgrade, but it was after check-in. You cannot do it ahead of time, so they made them pay. So it's not worth, depending on the destination, the flight difference sometimes is only like $30 to $50. Max is maybe $100 difference. So a lot of times it's worth just paying the regular main cabin economy fare. So we don't book the basic economy unless someone really requests it.
And
But I'm just wondering, that's why I wanted to mention in your pricing, if those were basic economies, because there is some negative side to those fares.
Yep. And so what I was gonna say is the Manistee-based fares, because generally those are combined fares with another carrier. Those carriers, basically United and American, they will not allow their basic economy fares to be combined.
Correct.
So therefore, all of the Manistee-based flights are non-basic, so that kind of but the other ones do include basic economy. So,
Yeah.
it's not quite apples to apples comparison there. And that is part of the reason we're a little bit higher.
Correct. So
Um,
in all
Cindy-
actuality, we may not
Cindy,
be.
would you recommend that going forward, I exclude basic economy?
I probably would, just so you have apples to apples there, because
Okay.
we're showing that we're so much higher.
Right, right.
I mean, that's for us, but I mean, if there's public that
Yep.
starts chiming in, they'll be looking at like,
Yep.
well, why would I go for Manistee if it's $100 more and I got 4 people in my
Right.
family, that's $400.
Right, yep. And then the other thing related to that is that sometimes we will include fares like on a Frontier or a Spirit that show up, which are essentially the same thing as basic economy, but because they're a low fare carrier, and that's how they keep their prices low, is by not bundling those features.
Right.
Should I also exclude them as well? Or, because a lot of times that's what people are looking for. I mean, those that, are looking for Allegiant out of Traverse City, or Grand Rapids. So by excluding them, then I'm not painting a full picture that way either. But yet it's not an apples to apples comparison, because, you're going to get less on those carriers, and you'll end up paying additional, depending on what you need, to bring that fare up to something that is more comparable.
Right. Well, I don't know if you want to exclude those, only because sometimes even with a paid seat and a prepaid bag or prepaid carry-on, if they're running a super special, like sometimes they have
Yep.
Traverse City to Florida for $59. Even paying for a bag in that sometimes is cheaper than just
Right.
paying a regular airfare on another carrier. But maybe just take a look, maybe just see what it is if you're doing an airfare at the lowest cost seat and one carry-on bag. You don't probably need to do the checked, because we're not doing checked bags on any other airline, and that's kind of standard, all airlines
Right.
charge.
Yep.
But maybe add a carry-on bag in there, just because I would say most people do have a carry-on.
You're going to have at least one bag, yes.
Yeah.
So it almost sounds like, to me, I've erased the base economy like we're talking about, but this other group that you are now talking about, leave those in there.
Leave those in, but add on to the fare a basic carry-on bag fee,
Right.
so that it's trying to make it a little bit more
Balances it
comparable.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds like a good recommendation. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
One more thing, as long as we're on travel, I did notice a billboard, down by Goodwill the other day. Our competitor in Traverse City has a billboard there, showing 4 different airlines flying all over the country from Traverse City. But it's hard to see right now because the tree limbs are disguising it, but it's there. Okay.
So that's going south?
Going north,
Going north, okay.
coming,
I'll have to,
coming back from the intersection there, or coming back from
Yep.
Gillespie's and all that
Yep,
stuff there.
yep, okay. To look at next time I'm down.
On the
south of
back
town.
side of the billboard is a 2-sided billboard, this is on the back side.
Okay. Moving on then, not much to report on the airport layout plan updates, other than I keep getting questions that I answer from Priya Newhoff on that. On the PFAS testing, since the last meeting, 2 things have happened. There was a conference call that Eagle held. Well, actually, I guess I'll call it more of a briefing, that was meant to kind of inform the public that we are now listed as a contaminated site on their website that tracks all the PFAS sites throughout the state. That invitation went out to all the local units of government, as well as the public. I don't know how they publicized it to the public, but there were probably 15 to 20 people that were on that Microsoft Teams meeting. And basically the Eagle just kind of went through, what the state of the airport is, what the historic usage was, and what's being done. So not too much came out of that, but I guess it's one of their due diligence items that Eagle does. In addition, there was a conference call with Eagle, myself, Prina Newhoff, and then the subcontractor, the subconsultant who's actually doing the work on this, basically reviewing the proposed phase 2 plan. So back in March, I think it was, I had shared with the board the results of the phase 1, which kind of talked about the different testing wells that were put in place and the different samples that were collected along the river tributary, I'll call it, that is just south of the airport. Based on that, Eagle wants now additional things based on what was found there. And I think everybody's getting close to being on the same page for that phase 2 work, and trying to keep it within the budget of the grant that is paying for this. So nothing's cropped up yet that's, you know, out of the ordinary, kind of proceeding down a plan and a path here that looks normal for the situation. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, Cape Air service. So some of this is already mentioned in kind of the air carrier stuff that I have in the data earlier. But overall, Cape Air is doing well. I'm currently still meeting with them, talking with Andrew Bonney every 2 weeks. The last call I mentioned to him that I suspect by the end of summer, as things, you know, seem to be going good, that can probably be made less frequent. There's just not a lot to cover right now, although given the busy summer season, don't want to pull back yet, because I'm sure there will be some things cropping up, especially over the next 4 to 6 weeks as we get really busy. But Cape Air handled Memorial Day well, which I felt was kind of a trial run of our busy summer. I mean, there were a number of sold out flights on the Friday coming in, and then the Sunday or the Monday going out. And that all went smoothly for the most part. As I mentioned, May total passengers were our 3rd best May. So this is kind of the ranking 2011 Frontier year, just shy of 3,000. 2017 was our 2nd best year, and that was 841. And then a 3rd best this year at 782.
211 still goes back to Frontier, right?
Huh?
211.
Yep, that's Frontier.
Frontier.
So, until things substantially change, we'll always be talking about, our best being best except asterisk Frontier.
They skew the whole curve.
The whole curve is skewed. Already mentioned the 2% cancellation rate for May. Looking at the current month, we are on track for our asterisk 2nd best June. Our previous 2nd best was just over 1,000 passengers, and we're probably going to hit between 1,325 and 1,350. So it's about 30% more than our previous 2nd best, which is actually quite remarkable. But Frontier breaks the curve, so still well behind our best June. But we're really seeing good reception, and with the 4 flights a day now, things are actually operating fairly smoothly, although there were some hiccups this past weekend. I think they were handled about as well as could be expected. The word I got is over the course of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they had 3 aircraft break down in Chicago, and as a result of that, They did end up canceling 3 flights, but that's 3 out of 26. So considering 3 different aircraft broke down, they were able to recover and for the most part get people where they needed to be without too much inconvenience despite some of those challenges. So
No, the recovery was using their old aircraft.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, yesterday I know they brought an additional aircraft in from Quincy, Illinois, just to take a load of passengers down to Chicago. I don't know what aircraft they transitioned in Chicago as well, but overall, I've been happy with how they're performing.
Good.
And going forward, we're looking ahead at basically being ahead of pre-pandemic numbers for the rest of the year, and I would venture to say now, short of some unpredictableness, for the rest of Cape Fear's tenure, they will be up from where historically we have been, * Frontier. I think I'll mention it here. I'll just mention this and then I'll mention the point I wanted to bring up. So I mentioned last month that they are remaining at limiting the flights to 8 seats due to weight and balance. That is not unique to us. One of the things I've recently discovered is that they are doing that for all of their Midwest routes. They're limiting to 8. And in the Montana region, they are actually limiting to 7. Apparently, a lot of their passengers in Montana, I think they said the average weight is 250. So that adds up over, 7 people. So that, I guess a lot of big fellas fly in Montana. So
It's all the beef they eat.
What they're full of.
In my calls with Cape Air, I keep saying that, we kind of signed up for 9-seat aircraft. Getting 8 is good, but it's not where we want to be because, it limits us by 12.5%. That difference between 8 and 9 is 12.5%. And that impacts the number of people we can carry with the schedule we have. They are aware. There's not really anything they're going to be able to do that I can see this summer. They're looking on some longer-term changes. For example, they're looking at changing out all of the seats in the aircraft and getting a different seat that has a titanium frame, which would save 80 pounds across the seats. They're looking at making the heating and air conditioning system that's on board more modular so that in the summer they can pull out the heater and in the winter they can pull out the air conditioner so they're not hauling around those components when they're not being used. And then it sounds like they're also working with Technim on kind of longer term design issues to try to add a little bit more weight capacity onto the aircraft. It's a new airframe. These are part of their growing pains around it. I don't think they're happy, and I think they're a little bit surprised that they are having these issues, but it is what it is.
I was just thinking, I don't know, I was thinking about this the other day too when I was reading something about this. It probably should be something we may want to consider when we're evaluating the new aircrafts or the new companies for service. When they say 9 passenger capacity, we might want to quiz them. Is that for a 150-pound passenger? Is that for a 200-pound passenger? Does that include their baggage and stuff like that?
Yep.
So is your true aircraft capacity 8 versus 9? And not just for that size one, it could be one for the 19-seater too, when you consider something like that.
Yep.
In true life, it might be 18, but for them, they probably don't reach the full capacity as quickly as these guys do.
Right. Being limited to 8 for the foreseeable future, if you look at the number of flights scheduled, let's take July, at 8 passengers per flight, if every single seat was sold the entire month, I believe that number is about 2,050 passengers, is the most they're capable of carrying, given the schedule. Realistically, as I mentioned before, the directional flow where people are coming in on the weekend or before the 4th of July and then leaving, you're never going to get 100% just because there are going to be empty seats in the opposite direction. System-wide, when I asked Cape Air about this, they said the best load factor they achieve on their routes is like 85%. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get best just because we really have some significant swings on some of those. So I'm kind of figuring 80%, which is still actually, from an industry perspective, pretty good for this type of commuter traffic into a more leisure market. But you take 80% of 2050, you're talking about 1,700 passengers is really the most we can really expect to get. Public charters in July has done 1,800 before. So for July and August, we probably will see numbers that are coming in lower than what we've done over the last, decade with our previous carrier operating 30-seat aircraft or 19, depending on the year. And I'm already planning on having conversations with Cape Air about, because we're 10 months into the current contract, it's a 2-year contract, DOT will start the process probably about 9 months from now, saying you're going to have to address this in your next bid because there's a lot more demand that you're not being able to handle with your current limitations.
Well, perhaps right now, when you're talking to Cape Air, you might quiz them as to the possibility of bumping an extra aircraft at their cost to come in and cover that 15% gap that's there. It's just a possibility, just a thought.
Yes,
But it's something
I have mentioned that is not something,
they
the
wanna do
logistics
because
of it are very challenging.
Mhm.
Getting crew in place, getting aircraft in place. And since they actually haven't gone through a season yet, they're still projecting what they think the revenue number is going to be to then justify. So there's a lot. I think next summer, that will be much more
Right.
on the table because they'll have a summer under their belt that they'll be able to use as guidance to plan from. But I'm starting to look out the next bid cycle and coming up with the justification that we need more capacity in summer. I think we also can use more capacity in winter and the off-season too, just to start building the case so that we're growing and not being artificially limited by what DOT has said they're willing to subsidize.
Well, as we finish out this season, we'll see where it goes, or this year.
Yep. Rental car update. There's not really much of an update other than yes, and basically that's the message here is we are losing business because we don't have rental cars. I've personally talked to 2 or 3 general aviation Gulf flights that basically said, well, we're going to go into Traverse City then if we don't have rental cars. It's a little bit more drive for the passengers, but without rental cars, they, for Arcadia, if they're just here for a day, Arcadia's got a shuttle. We can handle that, but if they're doing both courses and they're staying the night at Arcadia, they're then gonna, at least the crew is gonna need transportation to their hotel, et cetera, and we just don't have anything. And in addition to kind of on the general aviation side, we're probably getting 4 or 5 calls a day of people just, who would be flying in on the airline, and they're basically telling them, sorry, there are no cars, and, I don't know how that impacts their plans, whether that means they fly somewhere else, whether they dig deeper to, their aunt or whoever who might have a spare car that they can borrow while they're here, but it certainly does have impact. Not that we haven't known this, but it's exacerbated this year because we have actually fewer cars, and with the airline and everything else, more demand, and those two are coming together.
Well, I was just driving by the last several days past Victorian Carport, and I noticed like 6 cars I counted in his lot. It's almost as if he was closing, going out of business.
Yep.
And also
Watson's
is probably
is not
about
much different.
40% or 35% of his normal capacity in his lot.
And most of the cars he does have are used cars.
Right.
If you can count almost on one hand the number of new cars he has in the lot right now.
Mhm.
Well, they're all in that same boat.
That's correct, yeah.
Yep, which
So-
is why we weren't able to do anything this summer to improve the situation.
I did talk to, Rob Pepera at Manistee Ford, and Manistee Ford and Manistee Chevrolet are together, and, I just casually mentioned it to him, and he said, well, if things change with regard to automobiles, as far as being able to get them, he says, and it'll be the same for everybody, they may be interested in getting considered the
Okay.
next time that it
Okay.
comes up. Because they would have both, Ford and
Two
Chevy
different brands.
brand, whatever, not
Right.
that really matters, but,
Yep.
perhaps they may have more of a chance to get more vehicles. Right. So they would like to be kept,
Okay.
in mind.
Should I reach out, you said, is it Ron or Rob? Rob, or should I reach out to Barry Seymour?
I would think either one, but
Okay.
probably Barry Seymour would be the better one, I would
Right.
think,
Okay.
if he wants to get involved.
Okay. Because I worked with Barry probably 10 years ago
Yeah.
when Frontier was here, and they
Mhm.
expressed some interest at that time, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. It's good to hear that they would want to be kept abreast and
Right.
at least
Yeah.
consider it, so. Because that hadn't been the case the last time the chamber reached out to them, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they may come online faster in terms of inventory buildup than the Chrysler folks because they're owned by somebody else now.
Right.
Well, he said right now, they're in the same boat as everybody. They just can't get cars for anybody, so. But yeah, he said that they would like to be considered,
Mhm.
so.
Well, it's interesting because as a public use airport, our federal obligations say that, we basically put an open flag for anybody who wants to do business here. So it's not, we're considering them, it's, whoever wants to come here has the right to do business. So, we'd like to see multiple.
Well, yeah, I think
No
it'd be
problem
great.
with that, but. Marketing update, not much here to report other than the fact that Cape Air's new Midwest Regional Marketing person, Stacy Schudchard, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I've had one Zoom video with her, so I'm sure I've heard it pronounced, but in looking at it and trying to pronounce it, I'm not really sure how it's pronounced. She started basically the 1st of June, and will be visiting Manistee sometime in mid-July. They're putting together kind of a plan. She's basically going to try to get to all of the stations in her Midwest region that she's supporting in the month of July. So, the only other thing I'll add is that last month I said it's something we were planning on doing. We've actually started doing this, is that we've started running digital ads in other markets, and it's actually very interesting starting to see some of the comments on Facebook from people in Denver about talking about Manistee as a result of seeing our ads. these are very highly targeted. You've got to somehow have a tie to Manistee, which, you know, the wonderful world of social media, you know, they know everything about you. So we're not spending a lot of money, but it is very interesting seeing how that, you know, potentially can drive more business for us going forward.
Is this through Brandon or through Cape Air?
It's through Right Side Design.
Okay,
Cape Air generally does not do things market specific. They may do something region specific, but they're generally broader based. And, you know, for example, billboards, they're probably going to be planning some television ads in northern Michigan at some point. So they tend to go broad. We, because our dollars are much more limited, go very, very specific to try to make every dollar as effective as possible.
okay, well, that's good, going through Brandon on that. These are,
Yep. That is all I have for my report.
okay.
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
How are we doing on keeping the entry gate over here closed during the business hours, when it should remain closed? Has that been going fairly well?
Fairly well, yes. I mean, unless you're going to tell me otherwise.
Well, I noticed at different points in time that it's open, and I don't know if that is just because, the airline is here and they need to get in and out or whatever. So it was just kind of a question as if that seems to be going all right as far as you're concerned.
From my
From your
vantage point,
perspective?
yes.
Okay, yep. And then the Cape Air pilot parking, whatever, are
So,
they?
it was something I was going to mention. I didn't include in my report, but we talked about this a couple meetings ago about directing me to put together a parking plan.
Mhm.
And I didn't put anything on paper, but I've kind of bounced it around people here, and I think this will work, is basically the following. So in our main parking lots out front of the airport, basically reserving there's essentially 3 rows of parking.
Okay.
Reserving the first 2 rows only for passengers, but allowing TSA or airline staff, if they wanted to, they could park in the back row. Right now, TSA and airline staff tend to take the front row, which there's no reason they should be parking in the front row when passengers should be using that. On the side of the building, basically formalizing what we've been doing, which is keeping the spots next to the building for customers, general aviation, and then the middle area for employees, and that could be airline, it could be, you know, TSA, if they wanted to park over on this side instead of in the back, that would be their option. And then the row along the fence, which is where we've traditionally put the rental cars, keeping that for rental car vehicles.
Yep.
So that's essentially the plan that I would move forward with unless the board indicates otherwise.
Go ahead and move forward. I was just gonna say that if you might need some signage to help.
Yep, that would be a next step, is
Okay.
to kind of think about
Okay.
signage and, you know, kind of formalize it.
Well, when you're ready for that, you know, put together, you know, whatever it is and for signage, and I guess or somebody would put the signs together for you or something like that, make them sign for us.
And, I mean, what we'll probably do is we'll probably do signage piecemeal. We'll kind of
Right,
do a couple for this first,
right.
because, you know, for the main parking lot, there's not gonna be any signage out there. It's just gonna be verbal instruction, don't park in the front. Because how you would sign that is, you know, this area is for customers only, this is for staff and customers. In a big parking lot like that, that's not necessary.
Well, Barry, as
But-
chair of this board, unless somebody has some otherwise comments, put your plan together and see how it works.
Okay,
Go for it.
That makes sense. Yep.
anything else, Phil?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, moving on to old business, new business, unfinished business, I should say. I'm gonna mention one thing under old business. Several meetings back, I mentioned I was going to talk to George about some photographs that we had taken around through the airport here by one of our clients or one of our renters out here for aircraft storage and so on. George did get a response back, and I was planning on putting together some copies and so on and covering at our next July meeting. So we'll
But
go from
I
there.
think your idea is to do a closed session to review that legal opinion,
Correct,
which is
correct.
why you want to wait till next month when we're most likely
Most
all going to
likely,
be here.
right. So that's where that sits. I haven't forgotten, it's there, got a response back, and as Barry said, I kind of don't want it. I would rather do it in a closed door session. And after we're through with that, and if everybody decides, no, we didn't need a closed door session, so we'll unclose the door then.
And discussing a written legal opinion is one of the state allowed reasons to have a closed session.
Okay,
Well,
Thank you, Barry.
I would just caution you to run that past Lisa to confirm that, very limited reasons you can go into closed door session. Just because council is talking to you about something, does not mean that is reason to go into closed door. There's some pretty strict guidelines, but again, just please run that past Lisa to make sure,
Will do.
the county's gonna sign off on that, so we don't get ourselves in a jam. Just a little preventive maintenance is all.
Yep.
sounds good, Jeff, thank you for the advice. Okay, any new business? Yes, we do have some new business. Barry mentioned that he got a grant, and we're looking at approval of some contract, a possible contract to install a security system.
So yes, so we were awarded, and I don't have in front of me the exact amount, but it's slightly over $11,000. That was intended to be 90% of the costs of the security system. Our grant request basically said we would contribute 10%. In requesting dollars, you don't want to request 100% because that doesn't, if you're not willing to put any money in yourself, then it just doesn't look quite as good. So we generally request 90-10. Back in March, actually looking at the data on what I'm looking at on my screen, which I will share. I got 2 quotes at that time, which then I used as the basis of how to write the grant, not knowing how much this was going to cost. One from EPS Solutions and the other from TKS. And they're very similar with one significant exception. So I kind of wanted to walk through this. So scrolling down to the numbers. So the EPS solution, and both, while they're not exactly the same, as they kind of walked through and kind of looked at how many cameras we needed, I think there's like 1 camera difference between where each decided they wanted to place things. So there was differences a little bit, but essentially you're getting a video recorder server, the cameras, the installation, and obviously all of that for the price. So the EPS is the less expensive solution up front. So it's $10,250, but it's a monthly service fee of $105. So that's $1,200,
Roughly.
$1,300 a year on top of that. So 1 year in of this, it's like $11,500, and then $1,300 a year each year going forward. The TKS proposal is more expensive up front, $13,000, so about $3,000 more upfront, but their monthly is $10. So you're saving $1,000 a year going forward. Now, they do offer an additional $50 a month fee, which basically they'll provide all parts, all labor for anything going forward if you spend $600 a year with them. I don't think that should not be necessary for something the size of what we've got, that we would need that level of service. So my recommendation would be the TKS proposal. Even though it is more upfront, after 3 years, it will be saving us money not to have that $105 monthly service fee. My recommendation further would be for the TKS to actually utilize their extra $50 a month for the first 6 months to 12 months, just so as we're working out any issues, any bugs, it's not going to cost us anything, because, well, theoretically, they should do anything like that, they should come back and get it working right.
For a 1-year period.
But sometimes there are disagreements whether or not something is or isn't an enhancement versus a misunderstanding of what the requirement was. But I don't see any need for that additional charge after the first year.
The $50 a month.
$50.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
So that would,
So everything after that would be à la carte as things break down and so on.
right.
Okay.
So that would roughly be the $1,380 plus 600 plus 120, so just shy of 14,000
Right.
for that solution, and that would be my recommended approach of these. Both companies are statewide in their footprint. TKS has people closer to us. They've got a Traverse City office, whereas EPS is Grand Rapids. But
Half a dozen, 160.
yes,
Okay.
and they're both, again, they both have offices throughout the state, and so both are quality companies from everything I gathered in the process of working with them and putting together quotes. I just think it's better to have something that's more upfront and not a long-going annual fee.
Okay, I'm in favor of going with what Barry has proposed. The second quote for the $13,000 plus the $10 a month for the first year, then $50 a month also for the first year, for coming up with a total of about $14,000. If there's any other discussion, let's hear it. Otherwise, I would like to hear a motion to propose letting Barry go ahead and move forward with a second quote for the $14,000 for security cameras and so on for the airport.
I would make that motion. Phil?
Okay. Do I hear a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes,
Mr. Haw?
Yes.
Mr. Suda?
Yes.
And Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Good, I think it's time we had a security system around the airport here.
I agree.
Okay.
Then from day one.
And it is interesting that just the timing of this is this morning I got a question from TSA. Apparently a microwave disappeared out of the back room, a microwave oven that was just sitting on a shelf. And it's like, wow, if we had a security camera, we
Well,
would
we've got it covered
be
now
able
for the future.
to answer that question.
Okay, well,
but-
good. Okay, moving on. Any comments by authority members? before we go ahead and wrap up for the afternoon?
Well, I'll kick things off. A couple of things. Barry, in the process of getting things ready for the next EAS bid, is there some way we can reference what our current numbers are and also referencing the Frontier days? So anybody who is interested absolutely 100% understands the capacity of what Manistee could bring to them for service, as opposed to, you know, I don't know if that's done in the past. I probably should, but I just don't recall if it is or isn't.
Well, what I will say to there is that when I have conversations, with prospects through that process, I always do bring that up and I share that information. But I will say is, especially now that that's 10 years ago, everyone is skeptical that, you know, well, maybe things have changed. Even Cape Air, I mean, they keep being surprised. Oh, you're doing so well. It's like, this is exactly what I told you would happen. I think they're used to hearing wild promises about how they're going to come in and, you know, do all these passengers, and it doesn't turn out that way. So I think they're just trained to be skeptical. But having said that, I think, you know, nothing speaks as well as, you know, what we have just done or what we are doing. And I think based on what Cape Air is doing, and, you know, that will speak in some ways louder because it's more relevant and more immediate in the current environment. So yes, I do use all that, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily hold as much weight as we would expect it to.
Well, current numbers definitely quantifies the past as well. We've got well, I shouldn't say an outside shot. I'd say we got a very good shot at hitting 8,000 employments by the sounds of it. Now, I don't know if that's not going to probably be for the fiscal year to where it matters for FAA for reimbursement, but that 8,000 employment gets us what, $500,000?
600,000.
Okay, but that is the number, the low end right now, because it used to be 10.
Yep. And I'm projecting this year 6,000. It's next year that I think that becomes a very reasonable possibility. Now,
fiscal year goes to end of September.
Actually,
I know for us, but is that for the FAA?
Yeah. That specific statistic is done on a calendar year basis.
Well, we still got a shot. Okay, thank you.
Jeff, you know, I'm just thinking that on some of what you just referenced there, a reference back to 10 years ago with Frontier, I think in some of Barry's dialogue when we sent information out to some of these airlines for bidding, I think there was mention that at one time we had been at these numbers in some of his dialogue that was sent out to the potential bidders, if I recall.
Right.
Yeah, but the current numbers quantify it. You know, that's nice.
Right.
As the saying goes, what have you done for me today? As opposed to worrying about yesterday so much. And this definitely keeps it current.
Right.
The difference is, or a difference is, those numbers are only achievable with good connectivity. I mean, that's what made Frontier possible, and it's what's making Cape Air as successful as they are. We are limited in what we can do.
Well, if we had connectivity and we had a small CRJ sitting out there, I know what we can do. But there again, it's the right plane and the right connectivity. So, Thank you.
And right pricing.
Right. Any other comments by board members today, this afternoon? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next month. Some sooner.